Hi, my name is Elmer. I'm the Assistant Director of Debate at the War Room, and today we will have a demo debate between Aditya Iyer on the affirmative from the Village School and Aashir Sanjrani on the negative from Hebron High School. And this debate will be on the topic resolved: the United States ought to end its use of economic sanctions. All right, let's begin.
One second. Aashir, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, bro. You got a timer though?
Wait, my phone died. Never mind.
Oh my god.
I have one on my computer. Don't worry about it. Framing the standards maximizing expected well-being prefer one is psychology and space mechanisms is more justifiable. Do you know what? I'll wait. The studies provide strong evidence to outcome effects when people judge the ethicality of the behavior. Outcome seeds lead people to see decisions in a different light. People will see it a ritual of decisions, outcome determine decision quality. Second is no activation distinction. Rituals one. What is the difference between causing and allowing? When we allow something, we perform the act of allowing it. If I allow someone to die, I not say them, but I do let them die. Third is parameters. A point is reciprocity. Non-utilitarian framers can't be turned because they're intent-based or procedural. Non-util also it doesn't have equal often. And use allows for rigorous testing, which always because that's the considered purpose of debate on the topic literature. Most of the topic lit is written in the context of policymakers and consequences prior to theoretical justifications. TGS are good. Framework should be fair, just like any other argument. Debate is a win-loss game. In fairness, is like straight on evaluating who's winning. People on his theory and TGS are reason to drop the argument. That's key to substance based, which always because we only have a limited time to debate the topic advocacy. We'll defend the U.S. and the use of economic sanctions of the Islamic Republic of Iran have inserted a list of specifications and definitions below to avoid frivolous theory debates. Advantage one is stem cells. U.S.-Iran collaboration is key to stem cell development. Iranian stem cell research are the best in the world, and joint forces with the U.S. would unlock their untapped potential. It's obvious 16. Iranian researchers at the Green Light experiments developed cells and invent novel therapies. They have made a great strides in stem cell research. There are opportunities for collaboration for non-Iranian scientists. Iran is the cutting edges of stem cell research. Embryonic stem cells are pluripotent, unique quality to make embryonic stem cells extremely valuable for basic research, regenerative medicine, tissue replacement, genetic disease. Partnering with Iran colleagues offers many advantages. Iran scientists who work in isolation, experimenting in cloning endangered species, prevent their extinction, treating infectious disease, rudimentary tools like into building a car without hammers and screwdrivers. Western biochemical weapon companies couldn't sell products to Iran. An experiment that takes a week. It would take Iran scientists a year. Imagine what they could do and accomplish if they had the same access as what we do. Joining forces in research will unlock their untapped potential with Iranian stem cells. And scientists allow scientists to exchange research materials, allowing for greater genetic diversity. The plan opens up avenues for commercial innovation and open exchange of researchers that pushes stem cell research into broader medical practice. Brevelu 16. Iran's leading in stem cell research. In 2002, Iran became endowed with the most liberal laws on stem cell research for HSC cloning. In the U.S., public funds cannot be used for research done with the Iranian accomplished despite limited resources. Clone at par ahead of Western lab scientists cannot perform speeches of aspects of research routinely done here. Consequences of politics on progress. The removal of sanctions provides a unique prospect of cooperation between researchers and academia. Iran students will benefit from Western education and technology, allowing Iran research to contribute efficiently to human development, HSC, and regenerative medicine, and open exchanges students and professors will foster academic collaborations that are vital to our research. Cooperation among companies focusing on stem cell-based therapies will boost large-scale products and clinical trials and benefit the economy of both countries, pushing the leading edge of science ahead for the benefit of all. We'll isolate two different impact scenarios. A point is biodiversity. Advancement of stem cell research is key to development of induced pluripotent stem cells, which reprogram cells and provide new genetic variations that's critical to save endangered species from extinction. Verma 14. Essential to consider future management of endangered species. The tech advances to consider the potential benefits offered by induced pluripotent stem cell reprogramming cells have been isolated from rodents, primates, livestock, and endangered species. The use of ISPC technology and conservation is likely successful. ISPC technology has the potential to impact on conservation of endangered species, preventing extinction in a wide range of threatening animals in the future. Infuse much needed genetic diversity with acceleration, genetic variation, critical managing wildlife population needed to focus on legitimate ISPC, and it causes extinction. Torres 16. This reveals that the loss of biodiversity, 6 mass extinction event is underway. We may be at a catastrophic tipping point in the global ecosystem. Consequences could be catastrophic as potential losses of ecosystems. Excuse me. services required to sustain the human population, such as food production and crop pollination. The result could be a wide positional unrest, economic instability, loss of human life, biodiversity loss, a threat multiplier that by pushing the society to the brink of collapse will exacerbate existing conflicts and introduce entirely new struggles, fuel the rise of terrorism, biodiversity loss, constitute an existential threat alongside climate change and nuclear war. B point is food security. Tissue engineering innovation is key to global food security post-14. Techniques in tissue engineering were developed for medical applications as a spin-off for their research activity. Techniques in tissue engineering may be used to produce organs, to produce food. Biological principles are very similar to medical application. With growing population of up to 95 billion, traditional ways of producing meat may no longer suffice to feed the world. Food security may spread across civilization due to generalized scarcity of meat production. Through lax schemes, maximized, yet demand will double without change. This will lead to scarcity. Using crops for feed for livestock instead of feeding people. Reduction of meat consumption historically seems unlikely. Tissue engineering and meat might offer a solution. This will lead to less water and energy use for production. Food wars go nuclear. FDI 12. Conflicts will most likely be fought over resources. The French and Russian revolutions, World War II, have been inspired by the food. If people are hungry, the state is not stable. Body words are to follow. A credible scenario for World War III is not confrontation of superpowers, to self-perpetuating resource conflicts, massive failed states, terrorism, and genocide. Food security is a more likely. UK Ministry, CIA, CSIS, and also all identify frames as a trigger for nuclear war. Underview. One error theory is legit, anything else justified. It means infinity is dropped the debate. One error is too short to make it for the time to have no RBS 6 minutes 2 error means they can prove force me every time. Second, reasonability on one and seashell. So one error is too short to line every argument, make a counter interpretation, go for substance. Key to check over the arbitrary interpretation. Third is FRBS. They put his time to 6 minutes 2 in order to my 4 minute 1 error means they're structurally advantaged. Not enough time to win substance in theory. B point is deterrence. It's key to avoid frivolous interpretations. That ways makes debating substance impossible. 4 is gramming new 1 error paradigm issues. This key to being reacted. The specifics, the one and see that always get. It's the only way to have contextual period. 5 point is evaluate after negative theory is the negative when they're shallow and deep. I'm minded along 2 where it's impossible for me to win both layers in the 2 area. That's only half as long. The method debate proper reject fatalistic theories. His 4 tenets contradict the idea of another world becoming possible. Olaku and Terra by 18. Descend from assumption and attempt to develop solidarity, characterized as anti by thinking back to wolves in the West, that people can offer as a fight with the purpose of the account can believe identity insurmountable emancipation, neither genocidal nor possible. Anti-blackness is an unrelenting and totalizing hindrance to self-led and impossible to effectively resist having advocated struggle in favor of despair dancing. At the end of the war, we would still know nothing of their freedom. I didn't read the status. All right, I'm good for CX.
Sounds good. What does it mean to maximize expected well-being?
We had a theory of pleasure and pain, that individuals want to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Maximizing expected well-being would be that.
What would the AF define as pleasure?
So there are like multiple things that can define pleasure. Some
Is it better to increase pleasure or decrease pain?
Increase pleasure and decrease pain, yes.
No, is it better to increase pleasure or decrease pain?
Either or. We think that the worldly affirmative would do.
So how do we weigh between the two under your theory?
So obviously that the impacts of the affirmative are talking about like saving lives, which means that it would allow for both the minimization of pain.
Okay, fair enough. The advocacy, ending economic sanctions to the Republic of Iran, what are the implications to that in regards to stem cells?
I'm sorry, ask this question again.
So how does ending the use of economic sanctions to Iran somehow help our stem cell research development?
So the Brevenu 16 evidence and the Hildovich card sort of contextualizes this. Iran is good with stem cell research. However, they don't have access to cutting edge technology that Western systems do. So what
does the AF seek to place their research in the hands of the US?
It isn't really a question of possession. It's more a question of cooperation between the two.
So you want to force cooperation so you can get their research, or so the U.S. can get their research?
Well, no. Our argument is that they currently want to cooperate, but they cannot because of sanctions.
So, okay, ending sanctions would allow them to. So, how do economic sanctions somehow restrict cooperation on stem cell research development?
Because companies, like U.S. companies, cannot engage with Iranian companies or even engage in like a commercial trade resources information.
What evidence warrants that?
That's the Brevenu 16 card, like the end part of it. It even says specifically the removal of sanctions provide a unique prospect of cooperation between U.S. and Iranian researchers. It's like
it says that stem cells research based off companies will boost large-scale projects in clinical trials. It doesn't say anything about the decline in their ability to be able to research with each other. It just says that this will allow them to be able to research more. So what's the necessity of the app?
Scientists cannot perform aspects of research routinely done here.
So certain aspects of research, sure, but what's the necessity of the app for stem cell research to happen?
Yeah, so our impact scenarios would seem to indicate that we're sliding towards multiple extinction scenarios. One would be food security. Eventually,
okay, cool. I'm running out of time, so I want to go to the food security internal link. Actually, no, time's over. Aditya, you good for the 1 and C?
I am ready. Sure.
All right. Oh, I should probably open it. Interpretation of economic sanctions is generic paraplural, meaning the term refers to all economic sanctions that affirmative may not specify this enable and 19 paraplural are used to express generic generalizations. Authority regimes are generic paraplural, not an essential one. It fails to upward entailment and entailment resolutions not until the United States ought to provide. I lost my place. The paraplural of some fails upward entailment. Okay, all right, works with me. I mean, okay. Good? Good.
I'm gonna restart the recording.
Oh my god.
All right, it's recording.
All right, Aditya, you good for the 1 and C?
Yes.
Sounds good. Interpretation, economic sanctions is generic bare plural, meaning the term refers to all economic sanctions. The affirmative may not specify that's enable. And 19 bare plural is used to express generic generalization. The authority regimes the generic bare plural not. And extension 1, it fails to operate entailment test. The resolution is not until the United States ought not to provide aid to the government, even though the regime their government bare plural is to know certain kind of things not specific members of generic sanctions involved in more means of generalization and in moral context and violation. The aspects of sanctions both in function and target enable and 19 applications that specify do not from the resolution because generic generalizations are not until by specific instances regime specific affirmative interpretation, which is incorrect. Vote negative first is semantics that way. If a point is topic, I didn't rule of the activity, the basic effort, and they agreed to debate the topic when they came to the tournament. B point is the only stasis point we know before the round because it controls the internal link to the engagement. There's no way you can use ground if debaters aren't prepared to defend it. Second is limits. A point is a quantitative. There are 3 things at a time to 20 F times 200 items you can cut to space specs exploded by loose evidence in economic sanctions, unlimited topics, and certified obscure apps that negs that don't engage in the prep time on, and limits are key to reciprocal preference. B point is qualitative spec guts, core generics like hegemony that rely on all sanctions ending and shifting away the core topic late of global disarm also means no universal dissent spec arms. And third is paradigm issues. First is DTD there. Obviously executed the debate from the start. Second is apathy comes before one error theory. That a point is that if we have abuse, if it's because it was impossible to engage in that. B point is that he always is on to go because their abuse is affecting every speech that came after the one I see. Third is that you can be the A point is the topic of yes or no question. You can't be reasonable with top of B point is reasonability advice, arbitrary judgment, eventual race on questionable argumentation. 4 point is no RVS. A point is that forcing it in with a 1C to go all in now skills because of education. Next B point is it discourages taking real abuse. C point is it encourages debating always because it's a shells for they can be replaced. Second off is the kind of planter the text the United States ought to eliminate economic sanctions that Iran putting on Iran setting accepting the terms of new Iran the Toshki and Toshki 19. At the U.S. general embassy, the nuclear Iran apparently obscuring nuclear weapons and contributing to regional stability and retaining the U.S. and lifting sanctions and Iran proliferating the status quo. That's Trotsky and Trotsky 19. The more Trump clamored for the deal, the more Iranian leaders had secondary preconditions lifting sanctions. The possibility of leaving the NPT, non-proliferation treaty, and enriching uranium up to 60%, and even as a Iran proliferation causes preemptive Israeli first strike. That's Harmon 12. Why Israel will strike the Israeli leaders that will believe that nuclear war will present an existential threat in Israel. Israeli public will think Iran is building nuclear weapons. Israeli citizens are willing to be able to provide history repercussions on the actions of Iran and Israeli citizens are letting foreign customers retaliation impact their decision of Israel. Like proving every challenge can be overcome. And I believe that they cannot destroy the obscure nuclear plan if Israel puts them on Syria and the aircraft is maintains protecting a secret nuclear facility. Israel also should destroy the facility. Israeli security depends on a strong deterrence. Israeli makes it a precedent of attacking. It's so high that enemies will think twice before attacking again. This is the reason why Arab nation will stop and conducting all out wars against Israel. Israel will attack Iranian nuclear facilities. It looks like Israel was acting in Israel. Iran knew a war will cause extinction of bioweapons. Sterling and 11 user lose WND to use against Israel, resulting in Israeli thermonuclear warheads against Iraq and Persian population. But the spread of the fall against the northern hemisphere. Earth civilians prepared to launch against global biological terrorism, a base strike against not only allied forces in the Middle East, but also against American homeland. So we'll use DNA combination that use super killer virus. And third off is the sanctions we see also by now lifting them, floods the market and drop prices. That's around 20. Economic sanctions imposed by the United States on their government aim to challenge the and to eliminate crude oil trading. Framework designed to discourage oil importers by sanction banks that transacted with Iran. The goal is to reduce Iran's oil exports to zero, and Iran would ramp up their production and millions within 3 days. OPEC just in check. That's round of 20. The potential for high oil prices was a consideration, economic consideration. The United immediately ran to 1 million uranium supply. I can get rid of to the market to the result of the downward oil price pressure side. Should the U.S. oil export sanctions be removed, oil production and exports should return to sanction levels that results included rapidly declining oil prices and low oil prices caused global conflict until 2016. Collapsing oil will have profound consequences if they use potentially destabilize regimes remake regions after the global economy. There is in the Middle East there is an immediate direct security. That's what keeps that country that when the money runs out, that global security catalyst for global conflict, like cheap oil, shows a huge revenue losses and poverty, restabilize regime stability, rest in the cost, classic oil power, low prices, Greek currencies, inflation, global debt, deficits, rising flood prices, costing social services, poverty, such pregnancy spells of downfall regime and the fragile government situation in the Middle East will not be justified over related violence underlies all the hotspots and underview culinary theory offenses. What is it? They can't just blow up job earnings the next future, making it impossible to read a 161. I only have the 2 seconds to say after you can use last much to get the infinite period around preposition they think new layers than 1 hour, which is 3 exacerbates this huge third resolvability. Every round it gets to dissolve and it just gets to think about the 2 hours and 2 are good enough to meet me. They have to inject by for this, they get this 7 minutes on theory and debate, which my echo only gets to which is significant disadvantage because there is many black coverage comes first over the app must underline all these arguments, otherwise they prove to be you can make some empty abuse, but earning on this argument if they don't respond to it means all arguments implicitly respond to this plus if you need to then instantly qualify so they so such one and no reasonability. This opportunity encourages such intervention, no confidence can be there to get to realize on whatever they go for debate, no app or VS time is solved by 3 to 2 and equal to total time, so it's not unique because there is only fair rating evaluated debate and chilling out ways for list here because we need to check in Anthony app and prep neck. Here comes first because that gets a last speech in there, which just checks just psychology always needs a good time to see and case. I'm going to concede the internal link of biodiversity stem cells like a key to protecting the indigenous species. No effect of biodiversity. 8 points of human to survive the powers of 2. Many species will vanish, but there's not guarantees that there will be among the missing. Humanity needs technology isolated themselves and further in the natural world. We might have the less thoughts that will succumb, and B points our studies are better than tourists calculate at all in 12. Ecologists might grossly overstate the fragility of nature that as it supports the fragility and just disappearance of one nation might lead to the extinction of the others. This speech is inconsequential that chestnut were extinct they seek out will have no measurable effects of resilience, will not be tolerated and insulated through the review of the scientific nature. 250 studies of the ecosystem major disturbances the emergence of the species they give sense of function reserve that nature so within it can be rarely rehabbed and more probably human disturbances. Humans have many factors in their environment, such as biodiversity, loss of spirit, environment boulder in tow 2. Extinction episodes are a result in the current tree of life. The majority of the group survived the planet will do well from the mass extinction of the organisms. They might enable new environments to well do execution, and nature will be richer. The planet will take advantage of emergence. No extent effective extinction of culture. No 2. The system of life behaves in a similar way to all visual, all variable life system has external threats. External threats could be applied without eventually avalanches could be precautions without noise. If there were no mass extinction, essentially could we have the risk of being truly vertical? All planet life could cease. There is no going backwards, also going forwards. There is no forever unrelenting tread to life and order, greater complexity until the system of crucial edge. I didn't get to anything after the impact is extinction.
Good for CX?
Yeah.
Do you have a timer?
Yeah.
Okay, give you time. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about the impact turn. You say that biodiversity loss is key to spur evolution. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so the Bolter evidence indicates that major extinction episodes in our history have indicated that majority of groups will survive, but that goes on to prune a sort of alternative path. We've had like sort of 5 mass extinctions over the past course of our history, and each of those events have indicated that those victims have enabled new environments to develop and diversify further beyond belief, and has allowed for like sort of evolution to occur.
Okay. So your argument, how does diversity not allow evolution to occur? Because like natural selection would just say that like organisms that have favorable traits would just pass them on, right? Isn't that contingent on having diversity?
Well, it's contingent upon the surviving group to be a predominantly more preferable trait per natural selection, i.e. the more preferable trait would survive and thus pass on its sort of traits. Biodiversity loss would be similar to that sort of natural selection.
Okay. Let's talk about the second counterplan. You say that the U.S. has to eliminate sanctions predicated on Iran signing the New Deal. Do you have any evidence that Iran will say yes?
Well, it's not really about whether or not they want to say yes. Our argument is that economic sanctions will force them to say yes.
Wait, why would economic sanctions force them to?
Because it's contingent. Okay, so our argument is that we will end or eliminate economic sanctions predicated on them signing and accepting the new Iran deal. If they do not accept the new Iran deal, then we will not end economic sanctions.
Yeah, so do you have any evidence that they will like, yes, we agree to like this sort of deal?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things. One, I think that the 1AC has made very indicative claims that Iran does not like current sanctions, would seek to end it. The second thing is that our evidence would seem to be indicating that Iran is moving towards the direction of wanting to accept a deal.
Can you tell me which evidence says Iran hates sanctions?
I don't really know your AF, but I'm assuming you offer it off some, either way, it doesn't really, either way, it doesn't really matter, because it's kind of just logical to assume that economic sanctions, your AF is literally saying that, for example, stem cell research is good, and if we end economic sanctions, that will allow both companies to cooperate each other and produce, economic output in, stem cell research, which is good for both sides, right? Obviously, both sides would want to end economic sanctions to be able to cooperate and things like that. It's very logical.
The DISAD, the oil, why is Iran uniquely key? Why don't other countries just start increasing?
Well, one, we'd say Iran is key to regional stability. Two, we think Iran has a large oil supply.
Fair enough. Give me a look for that. The orders under review, Nabalty, case, counterpoint DISAD.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you good? I assume that's a yes.
Under view, one-error theory is legit. Anything else justifies the infinite abuse, which always unmatched you. First argument is not unique to one-error theory, but is applicable to any one-error argument. F comes into the round by which works in infinite private advantages and resolvability empirically not just do it all the time, times 6 times Q. Assumes to be spent the whole one-error reading theory. Yes, FRVI. Anything else makes it a time suck for the one-error, which outweighs it. It's the only way to quantify abuse. Total equal times doesn't resolve central rebuttals. Q's and chilling is empirically denied since judges have a low threshold for silly shells. There isn't a flagged impact of substance education, and baiting is impossible if I was actually abusive. F theory comes first since the one-error controls the direction of the debate, and we have a prior set for 60 times to overcome the judge psychology arguments or an empirical claim without an empirical warrant evil. Counterinterpretable within the violation co and all too far on top of the empirical capability made a specific topic is subject to be interpretation. Agility standards one is privacy. Their interpret allows any random disad picks counterpositive sanctions that the after we talk about. Second is topic literature. Most of the topic leaders in the context of specific sanctions, not generalities, since different regions and different incentives to act. Limits debate proper one under limiting is good. A point incentivizes on the spot analysis rather than reading a period on block paper and prevents redundant debates with one whole half. Second, advantage ground checks majority of your cases and sufficient advantage. Semantics first is wrong. One is irresolvable. They're always competing definitions. Second, semantics first is racist and infinite, but you should drop the debater since the impact filter to every argument. Miami 15. Fun and wrong, but every debate be correct as the out of function of the body versus all others. Any debater runs able to embrace a perspective from a common able to be for the notion that moral form is English and inferior and should not access the ballot. Those who cannot live up to these standards should not be involved in debate. There is no benefit that cardinals could provide case. Going for food security, they conceded it will concede the impact defense of biodiversity and just respond to their impact. And one is our evidence about biodiversity loss being bad. Post-dates your evidence by 14 years. Evidence was written during a time where environmental conservation wasn't considered valuable. Second is Darwinism disproves biological variation is necessary since it's a loss for favorable traits to be passed on, which can't happen if everyone is the same extent. Food wars, economic sanctions inhibit cooperation on stem cell research, allows for synthetic meat cultivation, which ensures food security. With growing populations, a lack of it causes nuclear escalations. So countries become more desperate. I've sort of responded to it. Also means that the advantage outweighs all their dissent scenario on strength only because they've conceded the totality of it while we'll just maximize defense against both their arguments. Also, there's an overwhelming literature bias to not care about things like animal death, which means that there's an overwhelming sort of there's massive anthropocentrism within the literature, which means that you should err on the side of the affirmative in terms of the impact. And regardless, all our arguments about the advantage sort of outweigh any risk of biodiversity. We've made arguments as to why nations become more tense and they rely on hunting unique species when food becomes less scarce and scarce, which means it controls the internal link to biodiversity in the first place, which means the second advantage would come first, the conditions counterplan. Conditionality is bad at voting. Should opponents clash? Most any one of our arguments I make versus the counterplan, which kills in-depth testing that outweighs this clash, is intrinsic to LDB. B opponents' time scale advocacy has become no resolution, which kills any time I spend on them. I sort of do the wing where time scale waste because the only way to quantify abuse. C point is dispo solves their offense and allows for negative flexibility while preserving some clash. Second, condition counterplans are voting. Should they first the affirmative to defend two worlds, one in which Iran agrees and another in which they don't reckon argument of consistency, which outweighs since it makes the one-year structurally impossible. Third, permutation to the counterplan. Functional competition is good since it forces them to prove a genuine opportunity cost the affirmative prevents them from scooping 6 minutes case, forcing one-year research. Either Iran says yes, which in that case there's no functional difference between the aff and the counterplan, in which case permutation in the counterplan is genuine, or they say no, which means cases of 6 minutes instead to all their arguments. And obviously things like food security would outweigh since nations become more aggressive and are more likely to proliferate. 4, Iran circumvents the counterplan. There's no reason Iran wouldn't just stop following the Iran tape like tons of countries circumvent treaties. 5 is a relations test at hardline approaches versus Iran wreck tensions and indicate to companies that they can't engage in free-flowing dissemination of stem cell research. 6 is there's no impact of biochemicals. Their evidence is ridiculously outdated. Our evidence post-date there's obviously doesn't account for more new treaties, which means there's no risk that a case outweighs if they say no oil descent. Tons of all causes, warmer winter, slowdown in European petrochemicals, gasoline demand, and the rise of electric vehicles proves that there's always all causes. Second, they are fragile. Yep. And Milhetti 624 crude oil prices are very fragile. They are caught between the uncertainty rising from the Middle East oil producers, including countries like Russia, have been struggling to reach price equilibrium, especially winning oil price volatility, or nearly 50% of recent months. Third case outweighs the dissent. Opponents' food insecurity makes global conflict more likely, so the nation become more disparate. Opponents' reversibility, oil prices can't go up and down because food insecurity is much harder and will impact churn. Oil prices being bad. Kamado 16, $50 per barrel is the price the Russian needs to balance his budget and pull out of recession, and oil price for doing something that would not generate enough revenue to pay for overly ambitious adventures because they got adventures and cause World War III. Schindler 16 let him Mr. Putin get away with whatever he liked. Situation, administration may find itself accident in the corner by aggressive Russian action that could create a nightmare historic proposition since the Kremlin is in dry Syria and would not even reverse NATO could get embroiled in World War III. The only thing that I just cut the bio evidence at adventures.
Sounds good. So the order is Nebel, the counterplan, then the dissad.
I got it.
Nebel, we're not going for it, but I'll answer Niemi. First is that 1-hour counter definition of engagement semantics. Brief concept way that was above. Second is that grammar / textuality is a metric for how we understand words, not a denial of certain words, but how the things we are we should debate. Third is that Niemi is unwarranted, and he uses counter definitions and interprets words. Fourth is a use spoken English, reify English standard norms. And fifth is a reason to drop the arg, not the debater make them. I say drop the debater warrants. No, drop the debater. Drop the debater is key to substance. Since we only have too much to debate the topic now, the counterplan we're not going for. We'll concede the permutation as a test of competition, the disease, biotary impact, the interpretation of the 1-AR shells must have a clear delineated to interpret. Paragraph theory is bad in the voting issue outliers and above the 1-AR shells because they're comparatively more abusive theory. Arguments of the 1-AR must have an interpret of which otherwise allows a 2-AR re-extrapolation of the impact, which skews a substantive clash into the theory level turning. Their standard features I have to over-allocate the 2-AR and the possible 2-AR routes and the counter-term, the negative may read counter conditional affixes if you should hold the 2-AR to extremely high threshold for the theory arguments. Condo was literally 10 seconds to the 1-AR, so if I put it in Condo, you should simply error negative first the reciprocity parts of the after conditional. You can go for spike temporaries, 1-AR theory, the offense permissibility triggers, and the offense, etc. Condo is key to give us reciprocal access to ballot internally to fairness levels to playing field between debaters and different resources. Second is it's inevitable. We have to collapse something they do in our make them justify why it should always be the counterplan. The counter-term always gives us more flexibility and go for a linear argument internally to fairness. Always because debaters are always have to should collapse and go for their best arguments also has an internal link to education. Third is critical thinking, forces you to think about on your feet and allocate time, while internal link to education always on transferability and real world thinking. Internal link to fairness is the level playing field between debates and different races. This makes the debate structurally equal. That Kondo doesn't move. Clash. I still have to answer and connect offense, i.e. actually the impact from the net benefit. Take out the impact turn. That's key to 1AR critical thinking, which is net more portable outweighs since it's all Clash is good. Time skew is not unique to Kondo. I can spend 1AR dissets, but you still have to cover all of them, and Dispo doesn't solve its Kondo and discuss, especially since they don't provide a definition, so there's no way to check skew. And now the counter interpretation will defend the violation. Conditional counterplans are key to mechanism education, which is necessary to become good legal advocates. Got ways on portability because debate isn't valuable unless it teaches exportable skills. There are also key to negative flexibility on a topic which is currently has got so many current events with chips and unstable net ground on the topic. Their internal link is the world is a counterplan. It's conditioning sanctions, which we have a debate about, and those are consequences of reciprocal to internal links of the app that couldn't happen, which is what the 1AR and no RBIs chilling outweighs, because it means we never have to call it triggers that infinite abuse internal link. We need some middle ground preserving specific debate, since we only get 2 months to discuss the topic. Think about the internal link through this. Now the oil dissad conceded the internal link trick, which means it's game over. Oil shocks have high prices, makes the machine and agriculture volatility. This goal conceded internal link is the app's impact should give 100% risk. This outweighs 100 internal. This outweighs their internal links because the stem cells and ag development require oil to sustain themselves. I don't need to win the case because I control a strong internal link to food prices. They will say stem cells need oil, but internal link, but to the app, but the stem cells save agriculture capacity. So if the argument makes the prices machines skyrocket due to oil shocks, they can't comparatively outweigh stem cells internal link because the stem cells require machinery that is based on oil prices. So we outweigh on magnitude. Now I'll extend the dissat. Oil prices are stable now because of OPEC regulations and sanctions of Iran of preventing oil from flooding the market. But the ending of sanctions of food to the market, and 2 million gallons of oil within 3 days, causing mass oil shocks and collapse of the oil market. Low oil prices cause global instability and nuclear conflict because it creates huge losses of revenue and sparks poverty. Major oil produces oil conflict outweighs food security. First is that it's the largest comparative internal link to instability. Food is viewed as a global common commodity through within oil. It seems largely fiercely nationalistic, but if it's more likely to spark aggressive policy. Second is magnitude. Oil shocks pit great powers against each other because of greater investment in crude oil markets. But food conflicts are only third effects countries which don't have nuclear weapons. That's third is time frame of food insecurity. It's a linear impact. We have no clear uniqueness. Our argument that oil shocks are unprecedented degree would call the war within days. Our waste, you don't have to die within that filter. Your float out. The only argument I have to win is the impact term. We have a very high threshold for winning a new 2AR. Winning any argument that wasn't in the 1AR shouldn't come out in the 2AR because I don't have a 3 in our A point is that any internal link is bogus. One is a high low price that could actually constrain Russia because I have no incentive to attack because they were making so much more money. Second is that the fact that we can easily switch oil producers from Russia to another country like Saudi Arabia means that they're much likely to be constrained in their behavior. B point is that the invasion of the internal link of war is empirically denied by Ukraine, making it more impossible internal link to Russia war, and Russia, which is putting a nuclear arsenal in their hand, and hereditary alerts, which results in low oil prices and causes aggressive foreign policy due to market fears. C point is that even if their time for the economic collapse, Russia would still have be aggressive because they can reallocate other funding to their military. Now and so long, they see all causes, but they don't assume OPEC regulations in Iran, which is the largest internal link that released 2 million gallons within oil of 3 days. Oil prices stabilized. Their average over a year old. That's best in 20. Oil prices are OPEC made to review or record oil supply cuts. Crude sale of 41.51 a barrel. You're going to see more OPEC compliance, and complexity is a war without an impact, even if they have other oil causes. Iran is an internal link which costs shocks that other countries. OPEC is reliant, but Iran wouldn't be if reversibility doesn't have a flashpoint conflict scenario. Since conflict wouldn't be immediate and uniqueness filters the flow because food security is much higher and longer threshold for escalating to conflict, meaning we outweigh on probability and time frame. This debate is super easy to evaluate. I'm winning 100% that the dissat controls the sole internally to the app's impacts, but the app causes oil prices to decrease. That makes a flashpoint conflict inevitable. That always a small remaining impact of the app.
The 2AR is going to go for case than the dissat. Is everyone ready? All right. Two top-level framing issues you should use to evaluate. At one point, they conceded the advantage, which means you should assign a 100% probability. There's only a risk that food wars would cause massive amounts of instability, which means there's only a risk that our advantage outweighs theirs. We just have to maximize defense against the dissat, and then it's GG. The second framing issue is that you should allow me 2AR weighing. The tuner did a shit ton of new weighing and extrapolation, so we need an additional speech. Otherwise, they had 13 minutes in the 1 and C and 2 to weigh, and I only get 4 minutes in the 1AR. So the line-by-line debate proper, I'm going for the food security advantage. They've conceded most of the advantage, and that the plan is key to open up commercial cooperation that allows for synthetic livestock cultivation. The disadvantage paid proper. Going for a few arguments. I'm going for the all causes argument. If we win it proves there isn't a unique link to the affirmative, that there's an overwhelming risk that the advantage outweighs on strength of link, considering that there are a bunch of other things that could trigger the disadvantage scenario. Warm winter, slowdown in European petrochemicals, gasoline demand, and the rise of electric vehicles could all trigger massive dips in oil prices, which means there isn't a unique link to the affirmative. They say our examples don't account for OPEC regulations, but ask yourself what this means. How does OPEC stop the rise of electric vehicles or even changes in consumer demand? The answer is no organization can control that, and this argument wasn't explained enough to warrant sufficient defense. Iran isn't the strongest internal link. There are tons of other countries like Saudi that would change their production based on what Iran does and what the world demands. So the risk of a link is incredibly low, and the advantage already outweighs on strength of the link. I'll respond to this internal link turn trick now. If you could reasonably predict this was going to be the 2 and R, then when you heard the 1 and C, then it makes sense. But insofar as this was just a hidden warrant in a card, you should feel comfortable granting implicit clash. They drop case extension that in the world of the affirmative, tissue engineering allows us to produce synthetic livestock, which means their internal link about agriculture and machine prices increasing doesn't matter in the world of the affirmative when we need neither, since we're able to legit engineer our own meat. Case outweighs the dissent. Their new 2 and R uniqueness evidence proves that oil prices are always fluctuating from fragile to stable, which means it's reversible, but international relationship cannot be mended that easily. So you should err heavily affirmative. They say flashpoints can't. They say they are, in fact, triggers a flashpoint, but this is just empirically disproven, and think of this as internal link defense instead of this sort of flashpoints argument they make on reversibility. Obviously, oil dips happen all the time. For example, when there's oil spills, which means that you should feel uncomfortable. Oil doesn't outweigh on magnitude or time frame, since food insecurity would still cause nuclear tensions, and it would speed them up even faster because nations become more desperate, which internal link turns all their proliferation arguments. Look, they definitely didn't explain the dissent scenario proper. In worst case scenario, there's an overwhelming risk that the case outweighs. We have maximized defense against the dissent, and we've also gone for a bunch of arguments as to why the advantage was just completely conceded, which means there's a 100% risk of food security, but there's some marginal risk that there isn't. We just had to respond to the internal link turn, which we just did at the top of the case. Additionally, I'm going for our evidence that they're stable, they're fragile right now, which means anything could trigger them. They read unique evidence, but you should prioritize our. It actually accounts for modern trends and changes in the world, which means that our evidence is definitely better, even if theirs is newer. Theirs is inherently biased because it comes from individuals that are tied to the oil industry, while ours is done by independent individuals, which means they are heavily affirmative that are going to be fragile, which means anything can trigger the link. They don't get unique access to the internal link. There's 100% risk that the advantage outweighs.